But how can UK entrepreneurs take advantage of EIS and SEIS?
My contribution is £10,000. If it's EIS, I'm going to get £3,000 back from HMRC. They'll just literally send you a cheque for £3,000 in the post. As long as...
Dan is a restaurant entrepreneur, a UK qualified solicitor, an extensive portfolio of real estate ventures. He's acted on property transactions with a combined value of well over 2 billion.
And it was dawning on me, this is going to be very, very tough with my poor A levels, my not so good university. I was just getting rejected. I had about 30 to call. I got to number 7. I was like, well, I've got enough work already. I expect this model to replicate into other professional services areas.
Business partners, the key attributes to look for, red flags to avoid.
The first thing is trust, right? There's nothing without trust.
Welcome to Curating Life Lessons. Today we have Dan Whebell. Dan is a UK qualified solicitor, a restaurant entrepreneur, has an extensive portfolio of real estate ventures, his most recent of which is Flex Lending. He's acted on property transactions with a combined value of well over 2 billion. He's going to tell us about his commercial life lessons, the ups and downs of entrepreneurship, and much more. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jesse. Very excited to be here.
Cool. Excellent. Let's start at the beginning of your career. Why did you first get into law? And then how did you move from law to property?
So I first really thought about law after my A levels. So not most people kind of think of that. I think when they're doing their A levels, they're thinking of going to university. Maybe someone in their family was a lawyer. I didn't have any of that influence. No one in my family had even been to university at that stage. And so we didn't really know the university process. I didn't do well in my A levels and I just wasn't really cut out for school. I was always fairly bright, but just not academically that well suited. And so I took a year out because my grades weren't good to kind of figure out, should I carry on to university? What should I do? Where I grew up, just outside London in Essex, I had sort of heavy influences of friends and certainly older friends as well, who all were drawn to the city, seemed to work in these finance jobs and, you know, make loads of money and do all these kind of things which looked very exciting to me at the time. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and combined with, you know, the A levels not being good, I had a place to go do psychology at the time. I just picked it because I thought it looked good. And so then that didn't happen because I didn't get my grades. Took the year out and I ended up finding myself in a gap year job at a local law firm, just working as an office junior with other gap year students. And that was the first time I'd been exposed to a law firm. And the young, ambitious 18-year-old me basically saw, well, this looks quite good. These guys are making quite good money and wow, this could be a path. And so then fairly naively just thought, well, I'll try that then, why not? Applied to university for law courses, but because my grades wasn't, I wasn't able to target the better universities, didn't understand at that time how important that would become. And so then began this long process for me, longer than most, where, I went to a lesser ranked university, but I got my 2-1 and I was just extremely motivated to carry on, sort of get this qualification, become a lawyer. Getting a training contract or becoming a trainee lawyer at big city firms was always the dream. I did work experience. It seemed exciting working in the big skyscrapers in the city and all that kind of stuff. And it was dawning on me, this is going to be very, very tough with my poor A levels, my not so good university. And I was just getting rejected. After your university, you need to go to law school for at least a year. And my options were get sponsored for that, or if you can't get a sponsorship because you've secured your training position with a firm, you have to pay for it yourself or, do something else basically. So I took on the debt, paid for it myself, was still determined. And it wasn't until I was much older, so I think I must have been 26, 27 when I finally secured the training contract. I was paralegaling. I moved cities, I was just doing everything I possibly could, and finally got the training contract at a good firm. In law, we talk about like the top 100. There's thousands of firms throughout the UK, because obviously a lot of them are very small, all the way up to the very big ones. And the top 100 is, everybody wants a top 100 firm, and then they talk about top 50, and there's all sorts of other classifications. I was gunning for that, managed to do that, and was over the moon. And I didn't qualify until I was about, because you do 2 years of training, about 29. So it just took me a bit longer. Finally got there. And all along, from my teen days, I just for some reason was very drawn to business. And I always looked up to like the business moguls of the day, the Alan Sugars, I don't know, the kind of, the sort of entrepreneurs of the day. And I didn't have any of that influence in my life, as in immediate mentors or anything, which I think had I might have gone down that path at 18, 19. I often think, what could I have achieved had I done that? But, it took me along that other path with law, and I'm very grateful for it for lots of other reasons. But that flame was burning in me that I wanted to, I'd always been fascinated with property. I grew up where people seemed to be doing really well in the dot-com bubble, and then all the way up to 2006, 2007, just as I was graduating. Obviously the market was going crazy, so it's all you heard about. And then I graduated and started working at the beginning of the, right when we had the crash, the big financial crash, which was obviously, a crazy time. But I still just thought, I see opportunities, I want to be doing that. And so what really changed for me was I was a few years qualified. I was sort of my very early 30s, 31, 32, and my dad passed away. Yeah, and it was tough, He was only 64, so quite a young guy, huge character, obviously massive, influence in my life. But that was like a real catalyst. It was a wake-up call. It really made me reassess. I was sort of a few years qualified at that point, working incredibly hard. And I was just sat there, and this is pre-COVID, right? So you're turning up at your desk, you're there 5 days a week, you're working sometimes till 3 a.m., you're really grinding out the hours. And you look, you're on the ladder. And I'm looking ahead and I'm thinking, I've got 30 years of this. And the person above me, like, that's the only step. You become partner, and okay, financially you do better, and maybe you grow a team, but it's quite a flat structure. And I just thought, you have to be here. I looked at the people ahead of me, I thought, they've been here every day, day in, day out for 30 years, working 60, 80-hour weeks. And with my dad passing away, I just thought, there's these other things you've always wanted to do, and you've never acted on it. Like, life is too short. It's cliche, but it takes something like that sometimes. And that was the switch. And then it was just a force of nature. It was a matter of time before I was going to do that first thing. And it started with the property, and then it developed into other things, which again, I knew I had this hankering for. But property was the next step. Yeah. That's my usual long answer to that simple question. But that's what got me there.
Okay, so could you now tell us about the relatively unique structure of Gunner Cook, the firm that you're currently partnered with?
Yes, so I became a partner there about 4 or 5 years ago, and I mean they're one of, well, in the last, I'd say 15 years, this new structure has emerged, and put simply, it's called like a fee sharing model. So traditional law firms, and this goes for a lot of professional services, you charge an hourly rate, everybody has their targets, you have partners or directors who have the client relationships, they have teams, everybody has targets, they have to record time, you have monthly billings, and that's how you're measured, and that's how you're paid, and that's how you sort of, you work up the structure. And it can feel quite inequitable at times, because partners in traditional firms, they you want to become a partner, but if you're in a big firm, you might have 300 other partners and you don't really know them, but you are literally tied into the business with them. And you've got no influence over their part of the business. Sometimes, someone's getting paid. It's not normally, let's say as a partner, you bring in, you're responsible for several £100,000 of fees a year from clients. Your income won't necessarily be directly linked to that. It obviously plays a part, but it could vary wildly, and no two partners are the same. So you get a lot of friction. There's a lot of politics, things like that. So the fee sharing model came about, I think, to sort of cut through all of this. And it's just very, very simple. If you have clients and you're a lawyer, you can join a firm like Gunnar Cook, and whatever you charge, let's say you charge £1,000 to a client, you will keep a fixed percentage of that fee. You do the work, and then for the percentage that goes to the firm, you get obviously the brand, because they're now a huge brand. You get the IT support, you get the office space that you can go and use. You get all that, obviously your PI cover and everything's kind of your compliance, your finance. So like all the stuff, which if you're a small, and also if you get to a point where you're a partner in a traditional firm, you think, I want to do this myself. It's daunting to do it by yourself. I've met many colleagues who've joined Gunnar Cook who had their own practices, and they join, they say, I don't have to do all of this back end stuff, and I can focus on my practice. They take care of all of that, and all I've got to do is send them, the cut, as it were. So that emerged in the last 15 years. Gunnar Cook is now, there's one other main firm. Again, Gunnar Cook in 15 years has gone from 0 to now about the same size as the last firm I left, which has been around for 250 years. Wow. And it just shows what they can achieve, because you can achieve it so much quicker because you don't have overheads, because you come into this structure and you're responsible. If I'm working, I get paid. If I'm not working, I don't get paid. And of course, they're not paying a salary. But the incentive, therefore, is to do as much as you want, be as flexible as you want. They leave it completely up to the lawyer to run their own practice. And then that it's very meritocratic. So there's a direct line between, if I bring in X amount of fees, I know I'm going to get paid X amount. It's very transparent. And as such, you don't have fighting over, well, they're your client, they're my client, and it's just, you'll have other people help you often and collaborate on things, but you just agree a fee, and it's just very straightforward. There's not sort of any infighting because you have to prove, well, they're my client when because there's just none of that. And a lot of people, there's been a lot of snobbery around it because it is a new setup. And
how does that snobbery potentially impact a client's view or a potential client's view of signing up with Gunnar Cook versus other firms?
What I've seen is, I think we've got over that hurdle now. The brand is big enough, and I think it's becoming more understood. I think a client, actually, the biggest challenge is because you join and you are, it's you joining as a partner. And if you want to build a team, a support team, it's on you to do that. There isn't, the advantage of a traditional firm is, you come in as a partner, they've already got lots of employees, they've got lots of secretaries, paralegals, trainees, you can all just draw on that resource day one. With the fee sharing model, you don't have that. So, there's people in the firm that will help you, of course, but then it's not the same in that, you go on holiday, you've got that automatic cover, things like that. So there's been concern, definitely, which I had to deal with, well, we're dealing with you, but what happens when you go away on holiday, or what if you get ill? And I think there's this perception that as a result, it's less collaborative, you act in silos. I found the opposite to be true. I've never been in a more supportive, collaborative environment. And the beauty of it is you call up a colleague, and in a traditional firm, you have a conversation, and lawyers record by every 6 minutes, right? So it's a tenth of an hour. And very often at the end of the call, you go, oh, thanks, that was so helpful. And they go, have you got the matter number for that? And that means like where they record their time. And you, oh yeah, of course. And of course you're thinking, oh God, now I've got someone else recording time. That's going to impact, or I've got to talk to the partner. None of that. People are so giving with their time because they're not on the clock. They're not having to do all of that stuff anymore. And so it's far more collaborative. The culture is incredible. The beauty of it is no one is at a fee sharing firm if they don't want to be there. So you're surrounded by motivated people who love it. And the people who leave, it's because for whatever reason it wasn't right for them. But then, in corporate culture, and I found this constantly in a law firm, in many law firms, you'll find lots of unhappy people, like you will in lots of corporate environments. And they're a slave to the wage, or they've got lots of pressures and things like that. But because everybody here is only getting paid if they work, and if they don't want to, they don't have to, it just means that I've found that does away with those issues. And the culture, honestly, I cannot speak more highly of what they have accomplished there. I can't speak for other fee-sharing firms, but the way they're doing it there is really impressive to see, and they're very ambitious.
Do you think in the industry in general, in 10, 20 years time, it will take up a larger proportion of the kind of the overall number of clients in the space? Or do you think it will kind of plateau and just be something which exists?
Well, I know for Gunnar Cook, they want to become literally the largest, the go-to firm in the world. And this is, we've moved into Germany, they've moved into the States, and there's other, lots of other places they're looking at and will continue to grow. And because you're not having to pay a salary to get someone in, you're just saying, well, you have a client following, come and join us, and you can just get going straight away. You could do that so quickly. And I do think that, I've seen dozens and dozens of these firms popping up in the last 10 years. And so I think, to your question, it will become more and more of a thing. And I'm seeing more and more lawyers from very traditional backgrounds I think, I understand it when people, and lawyers are very risk averse people typically, they see it and think, oh, if they don't have a big client following, they think, well, that's a big risk. I actually joined with no client following. My risk tolerance is a lot higher than a lot of people.
Yep.
It happened to be at a time where, because I had these other ventures that I'd started, it was an ideal thing for me. But I also realised, I think I spotted something there that was, when you're a bit more of a junior lawyer, because I joined at, let me think, I think it was 4 years qualified, which is very junior to then sort of effectively go it by yourself. But I realised that there were probably 30 partners who needed work. And so day one, I just got on the phone and I just worked down the list. I had about 30 to call. I got to number 7. I was like, right, I've got enough work already. And it just built from there. And you pick up clients, you if you do work, you get referrals, you do a good job. And it just grew. And I actually found that I leapfrogged, like where I would have been had I stayed in traditional law. I don't think I'd still be there. I don't think I'd be a partner now. I became a partner at 33. And again, there was a bit of snobbery. I know, some people thinking, well, is that real? Actually, I think it's the purest form of partnership, because you're not going to survive unless you're good, because you're not going to survive unless you're making the money, and you're only going to make the money if you're good, and no one's paying you a salary. So truly very entrepreneurial people there as well, and there's people doing all sorts of things. What I loved as well is you don't have to hide what you're doing. They encourage you to have other interests. So many people have other businesses.
That's really cool. That's really cool.
Yeah. But yeah, so as you can tell, I think it's a great setup. I think the one thing I'm surprised, and it may be that I just don't know about it, I expect this model to replicate into other professional services areas, because it just makes sense to me why people want that. It's great for, say, parents, because you've got the flexibility, because you choose where you want to work from. It's been remote from day one. That's the beauty of it as well. So I started working remotely in 2019 when I joined Gunnar Cook. And so that was, pre-pandemic, of course. So that was a totally new way of working and quite different at the time. And now it's become very common. But I think, and actually the pandemic has probably helped them, because it's a whole swathe of people realizing I want control over where I live and how I do my work, when I do it, and things like that.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. And how did you first find out about Gunnar Cook?
So I was aware of a partner that I worked with at the firm I was at the time. They had left and gone there, and I had a good relationship with them. And I left that firm because I just set up, I just made my first sort of property investment with my new business partner. We set up the property business, and we were just about to start work on the first restaurant with my other partners on the restaurant business. And I just realized, I said earlier, it's like a force of nature. There was just this shift in me, and it was like, I need more time, I need more control over my time. And I actually briefly stepped to another firm, a great firm, and I thought working part-time there would work. I knew the first day I was there, I need more I need full flexibility here. And so then I just remembered, that partner that I used to like went to that firm. I think they do something where it's like fully remote. And then I remember, I think it might have been the first day I was at this new firm. I called them in a panic and to find out more about it. And then that set the seed. And then within 5 months, I then moved to Gunnar Cook. And it was a crazy time, really.
Wow, that's really interesting. And now looking back at your law career as a whole, what would you say are some of the key mistakes that you made that you'd look back and learn something from it or would do differently?
Do you know, I'm actually really happy with how my career has gone and what it's done for me. I think there's not much I would change about once I'd qualified. It would be more beforehand. So just, if I was advising someone who was considering, say, coming into the profession, and I always think when I have children, if they're considering it, for example, I'll be in a great position that if they did, for example, they were doing their A-levels, they're looking at university, I would just reinforce how important it is to get the grades, get into a Russell Group university or better, because if you want to go into one of the top firms, it's just such a slog. And as a result, I took on more debt because I didn't get funding, which had I secured training ahead of time that comes with funding, but you only get that if you go to good universities, you only get that if you get the good A-levels. So that's what I'd go back and change. And then that would have meant a lot less debt in my 20s, and I would have qualified 4 years, I think, sooner. That's a lot of time. Genuinely, I really don't think I have regrets with my career once it started as a lawyer. It's more that, if that makes sense, more sort of how I got into it and how, looking back, I can just see how crucial that was. And it's crazy because you're 17, you're 18. It's hard. And that's where, my parents were wonderful and so supportive, but they didn't know about that world. And to be fair to them as well, as I said, I didn't even consider law until I actually ironically failed my A-levels. I think going back, I should have bitten the bullet and repeated my A-levels for one more year, just got solid grades, buckled down, gone to the good university, and then that would have meant I didn't take on so much debt, and probably maybe in 3 years quicker, because it all compounds later, right?
Yep.
But I learned so much through that process that I'm at peace with it now. Honestly, I spent my 20s really quite, I don't know, a bit of a chip on my shoulder about that, with something to prove. But then it's funny, isn't it? Because maybe that's what really fueled me. So
that's really interesting. Cool. And now, How does someone go from being a UK solicitor to a restaurant entrepreneur? How does that happen?
Yeah, so it comes back to, when my dad passed away and I'm going through this real realization that, you've always been saying you want to get into property, and you've always, as a kid, you always thought, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur and I want to have my own business. And whenever, you saw these things and you haven't done it, I think what that set off was this journey of, I really then delved into personal development. I was already sort of getting into that realm, and then I started reading finance books, and some of this stuff I was learning was blowing my mind because it was so different to what we're taught in normal, everyday life, and certainly at school and university and things like that. And for me, it was kind of a progression. I knew that law was paying the bills, and as I sort of discovered Gonna Cook, it was, or I was actually rewinding slightly. I knew that was paying the bills, and I knew that obviously that was going to be a good source of income for me. But I knew I had this hankering for property. So for me, it was just a simple case of, I started networking, I started going to lots of events, because I'm a planner. I think what law has done, when I think about all the great things that it's instilled in me, is it's kind of like discipline, planning, risk mitigation. That's all great, but often too much of that means you don't take action. I think my natural sort of personality is a little bit more risk tolerant. And so as I'm sort of then studying, and I always like to understand something fully before I jump into it, I sort of started learning more about what's involved with property. I just bought my own property myself for the first time. And then as I'm going on this journey, I met my now property business partner, who, this is probably 7-8 years ago. And we just clicked, and we decided to buy our first property together, and in a company, and then we bought some since, and I've done my own as well. And so that was what started that. And then, but I knew that I wanted something more exciting. So it was kind of like, I look at it as degrees of risk and degrees of kind of different pots of risk almost. So day job, virtually zero risk. As long as I turn up and do my job, which I know I can do, it's there. It's always going to be there. It's a good source of income. Then it's kind of the property, there's risk involved, but it's something, because professionally I would, as a property finance solicitor, so this is my domain. And, so that was ticking that box where there's a bit more reward. I'm in control of it. I like the fact that, it's a great wealth creation vehicle plus a great income vehicle. So it's great for building other income sources. And then, but I knew I wanted that third pot, which was more risk, but with it more reward. And so I was involved in a couple of ventures in my late 20s where it was one was another person's idea, great idea, got me on board, and it unfortunately failed. And I learned a lot from that. And then another one where...
What was that first idea?
It was online music lessons.
Interesting.
And this was before Cameo. This was before... I know Cameo isn't music lessons, but it was very similar kind of premise, technology, things like that. And because in my mid-late 20s, I lived with some musicians, and there was a friend who had these great connections with musicians, and it was basically monetizing their downtime, where they could do one-to-one lessons online with students and people who just maybe had an interest. And, we got on red letter days. We started getting, we had a lot of great artists signed up. I was having these crazy calls with like Prince's bass player and like Beyonce's drummer and like Eric Clapton's drummer and these, it was incredible experience. I just couldn't really donate much time to it. And I think it was a great idea. I think it could have definitely worked, but I think what happened in that, I sort of started to see what works, what doesn't work. And I did it, it was very risk risk-free for me because I didn't have personal capital in that. The other one was I thought about a new way of doing a property letting business, and I teamed up with a friend. We lived in Birmingham at the time, and fantastic guy, still a great friend now. But that didn't work because, I mean, we had our full-time jobs, but I think I was probably a bit more committed to it, which was absolutely, not a mark on him at all. And I don't think he was probably as committed. And so those are really good experiences to learn about what am I now looking for. So then when I'm looking for this third pot, what's a bit more risky, a bit more potential high reward, these experiences had taught me, okay, I need someone who's as committed to me because I know how much time is needed. I also need someone who matches or complements my skill set. And then I was like, with the actual business, I know it needs to be something that excites me. And, I think that there's a need for there. And I know that's all seems fairly basic, but when you pull that together, I was then starting to look for opportunities like that. So it could have been anything. It could have been a microphone company. It could have been anything. It just so happened that when I was in that space at the time, so this is probably 6-7 years ago, you then start thinking, well, what opportunities are available? And, you're thinking about things you might want to do yourself if you get them off the ground. I didn't have a burning desire for any particular thing, but then my friend, who had a background he was a Michelin star trained chef, and he sort of stopped doing that in his early 20s and retrained, went into the city and was really, jaded by that and wanted out. And we had a mutual bonding over, oh God, corporate world and wanting to get out of it, wanting to do something more. And then I'd heard, oh, he's gone to set up a food truck, and he's doing pizza. So he's Italian, and obviously with his training as a Michelin star pastry chef, I was like, oh, okay, wow, this is interesting. And I thought, right, I want to go and see what he's doing and check out this mobile pizza truck that he's got. And he's running it with his younger brother. I hadn't met his brother at the time. And I went there with the intention, because I was actually thinking, as a harebrained scheme, I thought, food trucks, they make loads of money. The food trucks you see at Glastonbury or whatever. And I was trying to do the maths. I was like, oh, wow, that must be really, really quite lucrative. So I went there thinking, let's just see what it's like. And also let's try his pizza and see. Anyway, I went there and I've got a photo, the very first slice of pizza I had. And I mean, it's crazy, like what a a moment, a sliding doors moment, because I was blown away with the quality of it. And my friend Paolo, who's running it there, I met his brother Luca for the first time, and they're running this thing. And to some people that might have looked like, oh, you've got this cute little, converted horse box, whatever, cool. But he was like deadly serious. Yeah, we're going to create this brand. We're going to have this chain of restaurants, and we're going to do this and that. And it just then went from there. And I just was so on board with it. I loved the passion. The product was great. And I could see how committed they were. They had very high standards with the service. Everybody was loving it, raving about it. And then this was 2018. And then over the next year, I'm like, find myself helping out, working actually in the truck to get to know it, serving people. We had a great time. I remember there was one time we did Urban Outfitters Christmas party. The guys came, because they live in Surrey, they came into town, and I went and helped them do it because it was such a big job. And it was the same night I was at the law firm that I left to go to Gunner Cook from. And it was our Christmas party that night that I had arranged. And I somehow managed to convince them, I can't come anymore, so I could go and work on the pizza truck with Paolo and Luca. Yeah, and so then, I could see how committed they were. We were just having these great ideas. And then June 2019, we ended up getting our first site. and which was in Reigate in Surrey. And I know I said earlier that I'm a real planner and I like to have all the data. When I did the business plan for that first one, it scared the hell out of me, because I just thought, I did this business plan, and you do these business plans. I've done now lots of business plans, and pretty much with any business plan, I think when you've done it, it goes in a drawer after you've achieved what you want to achieve. And I need to at some point look back at them, but I do very clearly remember I had this number, it was about 220 pizzas. I was like, if we can sell that a week, I think we'll be okay. I just had no data. I was just like, but it felt right, because you had myself, you had so with legal background, knowing I've worked with lots of businesses, I know how they're structured, know all of that, know a lot about finance. And then we had another director, successfully sold a company, director investor, non-exec actually, and so successfully sold his company, background in accounting. And then you've got two operators who've been doing this business, with their mobile truck for now, 18 months or a year, 18 months, very well. I've seen how hard they work. They'll work 80 hours, 100 hours, they'll do whatever it takes. And I just thought, I feel like we've got the right balance here. And if we can't do it, because ultimately it comes down to, are you providing a great product consistently, and are you providing a great service consistently? If you're doing that, the rest should take care of itself, as long as you've then got the other skill sets covered. And I believe that then, my gut knew that then. It's not like I am some sort of visionary. It's just, I think because I'd had those other experiences where I'd seen what hadn't worked. And I was just, I guess, a little bit older. I'm in my early 30s. It just felt like it was a no-brainer to give it a go. And now we're 5 years later, and about to, in 10 days, open our third site.
Wow, I love that. And touching on business partners and kind of like the key attributes to look for, and maybe also the contrast, red flags to avoid, how would you advise someone in that space?
The first thing is trust, right? There's nothing without trust. And that can be difficult, because you can meet someone and it's maybe someone that you've just met. So when I met James, my business partner in the property space, we didn't know each other. But I think, even if you meet someone in that setting where they're new to you, and I've met other people since, you've just got to be very acutely aware of kind of what signals you're getting. Are people doing what they say they're doing? Does it all add up? And what do you know about their character? And so if you do know them well, I mean, obviously you're best placed to do that. But if you know them well, it's almost harder, because sometimes you can be a bit blinkered, I think. So you've got to be very objective, because you might go, well, I love, my mate Steve is a great guy, but you may be overlooking certain things or whatever. And I think just being really objective. So like that first thing, can I trust, can I rely on them, is so key. And that's an ongoing thing, right? And then, so there's obviously a clear red flag if you don't have that. And then I think it's those other points that I picked up on my previous experiences. So you want to have complementary skills, because, when we bought the first restaurant, it was being run by a lovely couple. They'd always been their dream to do it, but they didn't really quite understand what it took to do it. And I think when you step into it and then you actually realize, oh God, this maybe isn't for me. So I think you've got to mitigate the key areas. So, the reason I looked at that and thought this works, and this is why I'm choosing this business partner, is because the two brothers, Italian brothers, they were trained in this area. They were operators. They'd, run kitchens before. So that's way, way better than if it was my friend who, well, I know he's a great cook. I've got a friend who's, lots of friends, and they're great cooks, and people say, oh, you should do this. And it's not to say they can't, but of course, it that's very different to, well, you've actually done it for a long time and you've proven yourself. So I think getting these key areas covered, but then it's no use just having two great chefs if they don't know how to do financials, they don't know how to raise money, they don't know how to make sure you've got, the legalities. Restaurants, you've got licensing, alcohol licensing, you've got planning, you've got obviously your lease, and there's so many things to do. And yeah, okay, I'm not an expert in these things, but I've done enough, and it's kind of more my domain. And then again, we had an accountant come in. So I think making sure you've got those key areas covered, and if you haven't, thinking I should get this person in. So I think it's and then the final thing is the commitment. It's gonna be long hours. It's gonna be, no one's gonna be there telling you to work on a Sunday, and you just have to do that. And if you don't, you have to appreciate, well, it's only going to move as quickly as I am in those early days. And so I think that's so important that you're sort of quite equally committed and being very clear on also how that looks. If you've got very different ideas of, I think, with my latest business, we very early just set out the vision of it and what we want to achieve from it, because it's okay if you've got different visions, but that's probably a red flag that you shouldn't set out on this journey, or explore that a bit more, because if someone wants something drastically different from you, well, it's probably not going to work. So those things: trust, commitment, the mix of skills covering the core areas, and then a shared vision.
Gotcha. Makes sense. I like that. And now a very practical question. This does not constitute financial advice, but how can UK entrepreneurs take advantage of EIS and SEIS?
So because we've done that with the restaurants. So so broadly speaking, EIS and SEIS, they're two methods of investing in a new business in the UK, where the investor gets basically a tax break. So to be eligible, most businesses are eligible. Property businesses are not, which is a real shame. But it's set up for basically early stage businesses that have an element. They need to have an element of risk to them. So you're not investing in an established business. You're investing in, say, a brand new restaurant. Or it could be a brand new podcasting business. It could be anything that's new. So there's not a guarantee that this is going to take off. And the tax break, broadly speaking, is, and I don't know off the top of my head actually, there's criteria as to whether you fit into both. But broadly speaking, let's say you were looking for investment of, I don't know, £10,000 into your business. If it was EIS, and I said, right, Jesse, I'm giving you £10,000 for a share in your business, I would then get effectively 30% of that back. If it was EIS from HMRC, if it was SEIS, I get 50% of that back. And what that means, so it's a basic, and what it is HMRC give you a credit against the personal income tax you've paid. And it's over the current year, and I think you can go back maybe 1 year. So as long as you've paid, so let's say in that example, I invest £10,000. So we've agreed that my contribution is £10,000. If it's EIS, I'm going to get £3,000 back from HMRC. We put it together with our accountant. It's relatively cheap to do. They'll send it off, and then they'll just literally send you a check for £3,000 in the post. And that just, as long as this year and last year, I personally paid at least £3,000 income tax. And again, if it was SEIS, I'd get 50% of that back. So it's really effective. There are limits as to how much, but I mean, it's high. I think we're talking like £1 million or something like that.
And it's, in essence, it's a way for HMRC or the UK government to incentivize people to invest in new, potentially high risk businesses.
Correct. And I think I'm right in saying that in the first, I think it's the first 2 years, or the first, there's a period where obviously it's the most high risk, and that's where you get the 50%. And then after that, it's 30%. And so it's very powerful if you're looking to raise investment, because you can structure it from day one in a way that it's one of those two. So people investing know, well, I'm going to get this huge tax advantage. Oh, and the other incredibly powerful thing is when you sell your shares, you have to own them for a certain number of years. I think it's only a few years, something like that. When you sell them, it's free of capital gains tax, and there's no tax. So, if your shares become £2 million, no tax to pay. So it's a massive saving at the end. And then the last thing to mention is, I think you have to have 20% or less ownership for it to qualify. So as the investor, I can't own more than 20% for it to qualify for one of these two. But yeah, very powerful.
Gotcha. Makes sense. And now, before we touch on flex lending, could you talk about how, with regards to financial freedom and digital nomad lifestyle, how have you restructured your life around those kind of goals?
So when I joined Gunnar Cook, obviously I quickly realised, well, I have complete autonomy over where I can work. And then the pandemic really turbocharged that. And with my partner,
Romantic partner.
Sorry, yeah, lots of partners.
Yeah.
My girlfriend. We, during the pandemic, during one of the windows when we were able to leave, we went away for about 6 weeks or 2 months, and we went to Barbados. Had the most incredible time, and then realised, wow, this is phenomenal. Why can't we? And obviously, she was able to do it at the time because her company were allowing to because of the pandemic, whereas I was just always set up for that, having joined Gunnar Cook. And that really just then, I mean, I've always liked traveling, but that really just sparked then this sort of fire in me to just go and do that a lot. And I think also my girlfriend travels a lot for what she does outside of law, and she plays sport. And and she travels to lots of countries. So it was a great way for me to be able to, once travel opened up again properly, to be able to follow her to different places. So I've always got that option. I'm going to see her next week, and we'll be there in Hong Kong for 6 weeks, which is just a wonderful privilege to have. It comes with its challenges because there's time zone differences. I've done it extensively over the last 4 or 5 years, and it's been phenomenal. And I've just really got to see the world, and really got used to nomadism. And so, you do get to quite an efficient lifestyle, and used to living with quite a simple array of things, which I think is actually a really nice process to go through. It teaches you a lot about what's important. But then it's also interesting on that point of what's important. I've had this wonderful run, and I'm now sort of feeling like this has scratched an itch to a large extent. And I feel like, for now, I'm quite content. I'm loving being in London. But it's lovely having that option. Again, if my girlfriend probably didn't travel quite so much, then maybe I probably wouldn't be going to Hong Kong now. But it's almost great that I'm sort of doing that to go see her, and I can do that, and it's not a problem. And then next year, I know I will. I get the itch now very quickly. A few months in the UK, and I'm thinking, yeah, I want to jet off somewhere, and So it I've as a result, I've worked in dozens and dozens of really cool, innovative workspaces. You meet incredible people. You some of the communities that you get to experience and be part of is amazing. But I'd say the biggest downside is, if you're doing that long term, is I guess the the sort of the long-term community, the feeling like a home, or feeling like you're really connected, because it's, you are moving around a lot. And I think I'm probably more in that stage now where I'm really enjoying my London sort of UK crowd, but it is nice to jet off when it's getting cold like this.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And now, can you tell us about your latest venture, Flex Lending? Who's the audience and what do you guys do?
Yeah, so we are operating in the non-regulated space. So we do short-term bridge lending. So that is lending secured on property assets in the UK for up to 18 months. And bridge lending is far more sort of mainstream than it once was. It was perceived as like lending of last resort almost. But now we operate where a mainstream mortgage lender won't lend for whatever reason. And often they're sort of not even necessarily that dramatic of a reason. And it's understanding where you can lend in these scenarios, and you still have to mitigate your risk, because people immediately think, because bridge lending, you command higher rates, because it is just objectively riskier, because if it wasn't as risky, you would go to your everyday lender. So our value is understanding why people need short-term lending. So maybe they've got to complete in a really, really fast time scale because they bought at auction. So they don't have, and the property's not in a good enough state to be what we call mortgageable with a long-term lender. Maybe they've got some adverse credit issues, but we dig into that and understand really what's going on, because ultimately we've got security over a property at the end of the day when we lend the money.
What does that mean?
So, as with any mortgage, when people talk about their mortgage, that means to buy the property, the bank has lent you money. You've put in some money, the bank has lent you the rest. And the mortgage part is, well, if you don't pay, the small writing on the TV, your home could be repossessed, right? So if you don't repay, as with any mortgage, whether it's commercial, investment, sort of residential, commercial, or it's your own home, if you don't pay, ultimately the person who's lent you the money, the company, they could step in and ultimately sell your property to recover their their loan and their interest and things like that. So that's when I say security. So we will always have a specific property or properties that we have that we're lending against, as it were. So if the property's worth £200,000 and we're lending £100,000, well, we know we've got good coverage there, and we obviously we've got various metrics to figure out how we position that with pricing and things like that. And this has come about because the thing with lending is it's highly regulated in the UK, and most people's first venture into lending is in the non-regulated space. Non-regulated can sound, is that risky? Is this sharky? Or things like that. That's what people think about. It just means that you've got the FCA in the UK who regulates all financial transactions, and we still are regulated by them for anti-money laundering purposes. But whereas you've got your NatWests or whatever, and they're giving you your day-to-day mortgages, which are highly regulated, and there's things you can and can't do. With the unregulated space, technically there's a lot more freedom, and you don't need the license from the FCA, which is very expensive, takes a long time. But the market still dictates. I have seen lenders in this space charge very high interest rates, but it's incredibly competitive now. Once upon a time, there were nowhere near, I think pre-financial, I saw, because my career started post-financial crash, I saw this explosion of bridge lenders, these short-term lenders, and I just saw how much money they were making. I thought, wow, like one day maybe that's something I'll get on board with. And I think my journey through property is, I've advised, I've then borrowed and bought, I've done small, minor development stuff, refurb stuff. I've And I'm now, and then obviously I borrowed, and now I'm sort of at the point where I'm thinking, well, actually lending looks quite good. And my niche in the last 5 years, I've always done some bridge lending, short-term lending. It was probably less so in my earlier career as a lawyer, but what happened as well is I worked with, in particular, one key client in the last few years, a new bridge lender, and it was an incredible opportunity because I got to sit and almost help build their business with them. I did all of their first transactions for the first few years, and I got to see the nuts and bolts of it. And ironically, it was October last year, 2023, where I'd been building my investments and my businesses to a point where, I'd always wanted to ultimately step away from practicing law day to day. And it got to that point in October last year where I was fortunate enough to be able to do that. And so I'd reached, financial independence, I guess, at that point. And I no longer needed to rely on my legal income. And I knew the time is now. So I took that time out, and I, it took quite a while to figure out what I wanted to do. And I actually thought, I considered lending, and obviously I'd seen it up close, and I thought, I don't think this is for me. But then a mutual friend of ours and a new business partner, Hayden, who I've known also for, quite a few years now, he came to me earlier this year when I'm still sort of trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And he sort of proposed it to me in a slightly different light and got me to think of it a little bit differently. And I think got me to see how it could be fun. And so we sort of birthed the idea of Flex out of both being in a similar situation where we both sort of recently become financially independent. We now had this really privileged position to kind of really just say, well, now we're coming from a position of strength, choosing what we want to do. There's no one telling us what to do. So what do we want to, how do we want to spend our time? And I mentioned earlier about vision. We sat down and we just got very clear on what's the vision for this company, what do we want to achieve. And what was really beautiful about it was we didn't mention money once in this vision. We know that if you create value in the world, money will flow. And of course, it's a lending business. Money is key to what it does. But so we know that's going to happen if we do our job well. But it was about, well, if this goes where we want it to go, how do we want that to look? It's more now about the lifestyle we want from it and the impact we want from it. And that's just an amazing position to be in. Very, very grateful for everything that's led to that. But it's also such a pure force. It's what I found was when I was in my legal career and I was looking to leave to go to that firm immediately before Gunnar Cook, I'm in that transitional period. I was actually also interviewing at some huge, the super huge firms, what we call the Magic Circle, Silver Circle firms. And I was having interviews for these eye-wateringly high salaries to me at the time. And it was, again, a sliding doors moment because I was still in that process when I decided to go the other way and sort of then lean fully into, no, I'll do my own thing and my own path. Had I got offered a job, it would have been hard for me to turn down. And who knows then what would have happened. But yeah, so I think what I learned through that process was, and again, it ties into I know it sounds cliche, but with my dad passing away and really this very strong force in me, another however much amount of money wasn't going to improve my life at that stage. I was earning well as a lawyer, my needs are met, but I was miserable.
What's the big why for you behind Flex lending?
So I think, I touched on earlier about the vision. So my business partner and I, we know this is our entry point with where we get into the lending market, but we want to genuinely create something. I've seen all my career where the legal process is turgid and slow, and you deal with lenders that are big organizations and you don't get personal service and things like that. So we feel we can create new innovative platforms for our partners, like our lawyers, our brokers, to make the experience a lot better for everyone. And it's kind of the Amazon approach, where the end user, the customer, the borrower should be key. We want to drill into that and every sort of part of the experience, make it better for them. In our space, it's always about speed. We genuinely want to deliver on that. And there's new innovative ways. We're incorporating AI into things we want to do. We want to eventually build out a full platform of that. And then I really would love to see us at some point do regulated lending and grow into something where we also then, because we've got a platform, we can grow content. I'm hugely passionate about sort of proper financial education. And I think that just because we're now a bridge lender or whatever we become, it doesn't have to just be about that. It can be about the things that we're passionate about. And because we're the founders, we have the ability to do that. And, we're big into personal development, into obviously entrepreneurialism. And I think with two founders talking to people, I'm hoping 5 years from now, we build up a library of stuff and maybe there's a following there and there's real engagement and it feels human. So I want us to become this large thing, but I don't want us to forget the customer, and I don't want to forget, I want us to eventually be able to say, we help people right at the start of their property investing, borrowing, when they're borrowing from us at the start of their career, all the way through to the end, and drawing on our experiences. So, engaging with that content and just trying to see what can we do differently? What don't we like? Building it from the ground up, saying, just because it's been done this way doesn't have to be done that way anymore. So, and then for us personally, we want to also, I think the thing that a lot of businesses in our sector in property overlook is when you're giving back. To me, like one of the most obvious things is sort of the inequality around property in the UK. And the gap is only widening. So educating people on that, how actually I don't think it's quite as dire as people sometimes make out. There's maybe you've got to change how you do things now, but there are other avenues into property that people don't always consider. But also on the homelessness and sort of the lower end of the scale, I want us to be setting up a foundation and supporting charitable causes. So from day one, we're going to be supporting charitable causes and eventually have a foundation, because I think there's just a lot of very practical things that can be done just to try and help the situation. I just think it's absolutely just horrific that homelessness is even a thing, certainly sort of street homelessness in this day and age when we've got so much wealth and there's so many empty vacant buildings everywhere. And I just don't think enough is being done to just sort of cut through some of the red tape, just be a bit more practical, just find solutions for it. So yeah, it's very grandiose, I get that. But, we've got, this is, again, I've moved away from the sort of, let's build something, maybe sell it, whatever. It's more about, I hope we're still friends in 20 years time. Yeah. and I'm still, Flex is still there, and it's
a whole like legacy piece.
Yeah. And not from a narcissistic point, but genuinely, because I think it can just be this thing that shows you can do good. And another thing that's really important is I think the property industry often has a bit of a bad name. You get your slum landlords, you get people who are just seen as profiteering and outpricing people from stuff. And I think we want to change the narrative around that and actually show that. I think, I rent. I have a portfolio of properties, but I choose to rent, and I've got very clear reasons why I do that, and it really suits me. But most people see renting as, oh, well, you don't own a house yet, oh, blimey, you should, and you're throwing money away and all this. And I think we need to sort of shift that and actually say, no, there's nothing wrong with that if that's your choice, and there can be many reasons around that. And actually financially, you can build a very strong case as to why that makes a lot of sense, and more sense than even living in a place you own. But
Even in a place like London. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting take. So, what would you say your personal reasons, with all your life goals considered, are you currently renting?
well, flexibility. When you are away a lot, it allows you to be a bit more flexible, and also it reduces your costs. I'm at a position where I don't have to be so sensitive about that anymore, but I think it's good from a financial discipline point of view. Also, I built a portfolio of properties outside of London to give me income to then rent something that I couldn't afford, of a quality that I couldn't afford in London. So that's another ironic thing. Going through a mortgage process to buy a place, I mean, it's hard, right? And obviously, if you need to, if you need to evidence a certain amount of income, prices are so high here. It's very, very hard to do that, and it's priced me out, to be honest, of buying what I'd like to buy. I'm not saying I'd rule it out completely, but also the thing is, if you've got, say, it could be other investments, but if you just take property as an example, if you have a portfolio of investment properties, or even just one, you're still invested in the market, you're still getting the benefit of the growth, you're getting the benefit of that income now, and then even if it doesn't cover your rent, it's still going towards it, and it's lowering your costs. So, and then people say, right, but you don't own it. But right now I don't have a family. When I have a family, then it might make sense. There's an emotional element to things, and there's like what I call a spreadsheet element. And I live at the moment largely by the spreadsheet thing, where financially that really makes sense to me. My lifestyle is paid for from my investments, which is just, it's an incredible thing to be able to do. And but it means that right now, okay, I don't have a place I live in that I own. But for those reasons, it just makes financial sense to me. I will get to a place I know where I want to buy somewhere that I want to then make my dream home. And I get that you can't do that to a rental property. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with, if that's your dream and you want that and you want to make it your home, you want to craft it how you want it, then absolutely. But I think it's just, what I like to do is, it's a very emotive topic, and people they're in very staunch camps. For me, it's just, I think, everybody's got their own personal way of seeing things and doing things, but just recognizing that when you do that, you don't have the flexibility when you buy it. It's just seeing it for what it is, and understanding why you're doing it. And if your reason is, well, I just want to own my own home because I have more security, and maybe also I don't want to have a mortgage, which again, leveraging in property from a spreadsheet perspective makes the most sense, from a return perspective. But if you're not comfortable with that, again, that's absolutely fine. So, but it's also the flip side of not looking at, well, if you're just renting, well, that you're not buying. Again, I've got very clear reasons for that. So, yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me.
That makes sense.
That's why I do it.
That's really interesting. Okay, final 3 questions. What is the advice that your current self would give to yourself 10 years ago?
I think it would be that there's no perfect timing. So now is the time, just to basically step in and try what you have wanted to be trying for a while. So it's almost like the Nike, just do it, and that can sound very sort of blasé, but there is, taking action is really what it comes down to. And I know you've got to put work into something before you take that first step, but it would just be, look, trust your gut, take the action, and good things will follow. So I think getting started sooner might have served me slightly better. So yeah, I think looking back 10 years ago, it would have just said, look, just jump in. If you're thinking about it, just jump in. Because I definitely now I feel like I embody that a lot more.
Gotcha.
And it's served me well.
Nice. I like that. And now, what do you think yourself in 10 years' time would advise you?
I think in 10 years' time, I'm becoming more and more sort of conscious and aware that I'm getting a bit older. And I know everybody's still, obviously my mum was to say, oh, you're still so young, things like that. But I think it's really good to be mindful that life and time is finite. And we get so caught up in the future. And, obviously I do think ahead a lot. So I think my future self would say, make sure that's all great and crack on with what you're doing, but enjoy the journey. And I think that is easily said. It's hard to accomplish, but if you're in a position where you are choosing what you want to do, which I'm fortunate enough to be doing, you need to be enjoying it, right? So, because again, I'm no longer doing jobs I don't enjoy, and I've hard won that right to be able to now choose what I want to do. So, for goodness sake, you have to then make sure you do enjoy the journey. It's not about the destination. If you just keep focusing on, well, we want to do that in 5 years, we want to do that in 10 years, and then I'll be happy, or then I'll have this, whatever. And so it's enjoy the journey, which is be present more and more. And like I said, it's easily said. I think the way you embody that is you just got to be more conscious of it, right? You've just got to keep trying. It's going to be imperfect. There'll be times where you fluctuate, but I think if that's at the forefront, then you've got a better chance of doing it. But yeah, I hope it definitely say, look, it's going to work out okay, and just make sure you enjoy it.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. It's funny how much of a common thread that is between guests.
Okay.
That aspect of like their future self or their current self wanting to, enjoy the journey a little bit more. It's interesting. Final question. Mm-hmm. What is your favorite quotation right now and why?
So, gosh, I see a lot fly around. I think, oh, that's great. But I come back to like one, I don't know, like 10 years, it just consistently stays with me. And it's from Tony Robbins, where he says, exist in a beautiful state no matter what. Now, the way I like to boil that down or make just a little bit more accessible is just focus on what you can control. It served me so well for the last 10 years, and certainly in my business journey. And at its core, it's just basically, it's just when you focus on what you can do, it's tremendously freeing. And, it's a way of dealing with anxieties. It's a way of also managing your own internal emotional state and your own sort of fluctuations and things like that. Because you really cannot control. There's so much you can't control in this world, and the more that you keep moving towards that and just focusing on what you can do and setting your expectations around that, the happier you will be, the more content you will be. And like I said about enjoying the journey, it's certainly hard. At times it's really hard and really challenging. But the responsibility, I think we touched on it earlier, you can't control what happens to you a lot of the time, but you can control how you respond. And that's a beautiful power that we all have. So I think focusing on that, it just, in your mind, you have freedom up there. No one can tell you what you can do up there and how you can approach your life. And so I think the more and more you focus on that, the more and more contentment you unlock. Even if you're doing something maybe that you don't enjoy, you can reframe it in your mind. It's like, okay, well, I'll just focus on the bits I can control and doing my job right on that. It doesn't mean you stop trying to improve other things, but I find when you really do have that at your core, you just have a better day-to-day experience of life.
I like that. I like that. Cool. Excellent. Thanks for your time and coming on the show. It's been good, man.
Cheers, Jesse. Been a pleasure.